from the original teachings of Paramhansa Yogananda, in this case as expressed through Swami Kriyananda's life with him, living with him, which he shares in his autobiography, The Path. And the quotation I want to concentrate on today is this: "Milk will not float on water," he often reminded us, "but mingles with it. Similarly, as long as your devotion is still, quote, liquid, that is to say, untried, it may be diluted by worldly influences. You should therefore avoid such influences as much as possible. Only when the, quote, milk of your consciousness has been churned into, quote, butter of divine realization, will it float easily on the water of this world and remain unaffected by it. The mind of the worldly man," he once said, "is like a sieve, riddled with desires, distractions, and worries. It is impossible for a person in such a state of mind to gather and hold the milk of peace." I'd like to take that another step as well and say to gather and hold the milk of wisdom. I think many of us have probably experienced reading something inspiring, in my case, in the teachings of Yogananda, let's say his own autobiography of a yogi, the classic spiritual text. And I think I often share with friends, I've probably read that book maybe more than 20 times through the years. And yet, every time I do, there is something that jumps off the page at me, many times actually, which I had not been aware of before consciously. Of course, our life experiences change in between readings. Our meditations perhaps deepen in between readings. Also, it depends on when and where we're reading it, if we're in seclusion or if we're just picking it up any old day. But my point is that unless we're in a very calm, receptive state, then some of the wisdom could escape us through what he describes here, the sieve of our consciousness, the sieve of our mind, because there's many holes in our consciousness of restlessness and disruption. He has another analogy Swami Kriyananda used to like to comment on, and it's very similar. It's a pail that is full of milk, and it's holding all the milk. But if that same pail had a lot of holes in it, the milk would just simply flow out. It could not be retained. And so we have that issue spiritually where it's not retained. It's not only not retained, it's never initially received because our minds are just simply too restless. In fact, this Sunday, I'll be giving the talk at the Sunday service at Ananda in Washington at the Bothell Blue Lotus Temple. And the subject is, can man see God? And of course, one of the key issues is that we often don't see God because our minds are simply too restless. So until we can raise our consciousness into that state of peace, as he describes here in the book, that state of stillness, then it's difficult for us to perceive the divine within us because we are not still in our minds. A billion thoughts are going through our minds and through our hearts. And as long as that's the case, it's very, very difficult to perceive peace, love, or wisdom, any of the divine qualities. And so what he's talking about initially in here, I love that analogy of milk. That same milk, when it's put in water, it simply mingles with it. The milk first needs to be churned to butter so it can float on top of the water. And that is the state of our consciousness. If we are just beginning to meditate, just beginning to feel a sense of recognition of the divine which resides within each and every one of us, and our friends invite us out to, a bar or a, very restless activity of one sort or another, it'll be very difficult for us to retain that peace, to retain that calmness. We will just sort of blend in with the furniture, as the saying goes, and get caught up in the outer activities that are all around us and the billions of thoughts that we're being bombarded with. Same with everything, movies, books, television, any of the distractions that we find ourselves caught up in. It's not that those things are bad in and of themselves. There can be beautiful, uplifting books, movies, and such. That's not the point. The point is that until we are in a very steady state of calmness where we become a cause rather than an effect. The act of meditation itself, as it slows down that reactive process into stillness. And stillness is the voice of God. Until we've been able to slow down that reactive process to where we become the cause rather than the effect of all the influences around us, we do well to consciously surround ourselves with environments that are supportive of our spiritual efforts, with friends of like mind, with group meditations, with, serving in charitable manners, and there's lots of ways in which we can surround ourselves consciously with a supportive environment to the spiritual life. Joy to you, and we will see you again tomorrow. Many blessings. Bye-bye now.